Welcome back to Money Matters. I'm Emily Johnson, joined by David Kroll, and we've been discussing market updates, inflation, unemployment, employment, and what some of the drivers are, sort of in an attempt to be apolitical. So why don't we keep diving into that?
Just to restate, there are the big chess pieces, some of which are in play at sometimes in the economy, some of which are not. It looks as if we are going to have a full-bore, near-capacity economy coming into and through 2017. Employment at a 10-year low, productive capacity at a 10-year high. What this means is that the stage is set for certain types of inflation or certain movements in the market which will affect you guys directly. Here's an easy one that is close to all of us here in Hilton Head, Bluffton, housing. What you will begin to see is a tighter and tighter housing inventory and more money spent on housing relative to household income. There's a big news splash that occurred this morning. Now it's now evening in London. In London, the average cost of a home is 7.5 times the household income.
Wow.
Now, we as lenders have a different set of criteria, which usually translates to somewhere around 5 times your annual income.
Mm-hmm.
That's assuming you don't have very much debt.
Right.
Other debt, cars, credit cards, student loans, ancillary debt of any kind. So we can get you up to about 5 times, and that's aggressive. Everybody agrees that that's very aggressive. If the market, independent lenders don't get to call the tune. All we get to do is to react. And so we get to say, gee, if you want to buy that house, here's how much it's going to cost, and we approve or don't approve of that expense in your life. So we're in a reactive mode. The market sets the price and value of houses.
Mm-hmm.
In this part of the world, the price of houses is going up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely.
And in an economy with these particular big box items, big chess pieces, really beginning to sort of vibrate.
Mm-hmm.
Stock portfolios are at their all-time highs.
We're also seeing rents going up. And I know that the balance between the to-rent or the to-own decision, it has been an interesting one for the last, it's always interesting to people like us, I guess, but it's been interesting for the past several years because rents have been so high relative to the cost to own, except that the cost to own required so much cash down and required good credit that it was not possible, so you still had these very high rents with housing at a reasonable rate. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, as the economy becomes healthier and healthier and there's more people employed, and in theory there's more savings, although I haven't looked at those statistics in a while. I don't know if we're actually saving what we're making anymore, but that you might see some more of that ebb and flow as well.
Absolutely, the equation has come back a little bit closer. Housing prices are going up, cost of money has gone up, so the cost of home ownership has gone up slightly in relationship to renting.
But let's talk about that, for the cost of ownership from the long term, because I know we always talk about interest rates from the short term, the 10-year, and then the long term. Are you seeing a whole lot, because I haven't actually looked at the long term in the last couple of days, so are you seeing a whole lot in movement at the long end of the curve? Because I know the short, that 10-year, sort of fell down a little bit, but are you seeing much movement in the 30-year?
The 10 years back up. The day before the election, the 10-year, which dictates so many of our rates, and actually dictates most of the 30-year mortgage rates, oddly enough, because of very, very complicated calculations. It's the day before the election, the 10-year Treasury was at 1.85%, and yes, the day before yesterday, it was at 2.51.
So it was back to 2.5. Okay.
And now it's back to 2.45. and maybe coming down a little bit again today.
So why is that happening, though? Because I thought that was sort of interesting, and the same thing, because that impacts the long end, the 30-year, which is what all of our, not all of our, but most of our mortgages are based off of.
It means money is continuing to pour into the bond markets, in spite of the stock markets being at an all-time high. They are moving together. Investors, big, powerful, fancy investors, are still not making long-term bets on the economy.
Right.
They're still not. So they're in it, but they're nervous in it.
And yet there's not outflows. I mean, one of the things that we look at is, are there outflows from equities? And if there's outflows, where are they going? There are not outflows from equities. There is money flowing into equities in all shapes and sizes, whether that's meaning stocks, mutual funds, ETFs, whatever it is. They're all kind of one and the same. And there's money flowing into the bond market. So there's just lots and lots of cash on the sidelines saying we got to earn something because we're not earning anything sitting. And because inflation. So that's the other part is, you always say, well, I'd feel more comfortable. You hear people say, I feel more comfortable with my money under my mattress. Well, if you actually have real inflation, which we're starting to see, knowledgeable investors look at that and realize we have to keep up with that, and the only way to do it is going to be to make something on our money, which means we have to put it at risk. It's either at risk in the bond market or it's at risk in the equity market, and you try to balance that risk relative to return, and that's what this whole show is about.
And what Emily and I have been saying for ages, ad nauseum, is that there's vast, huge sums of money uninvested on the sidelines. Corporations, I think Apple has some astronomical sum, 30 or 40 billion dollars. I mean, just crazy amount of money. The amount of money in reserves that a country would have. I mean, it's just crazy.
Well, and you have all this cash that's overseas that's
not yet taxed.
Right, exactly. Well, it's also not being put to work in any way, shape, or form, and they're not chomping at the bit to do it because of the tax that would be levied at this point to do it. But that's still on the sidelines, so if that changed.
But it doesn't surprise either of us that we're entering a period where there's plenty enough money to fuel the equities market and to fuel the bond market.
And interestingly, that will keep bonds, for those of you that follow it, that will or should, because of all that extra cash, if there is continuous flow of cash into the United States in one way or another, repatriation or just because there's so much cash on the sidelines, that will keep those bond rates low. So that what we were talking about in the first half of the show of inflation / hyperinflation, even though we're at 2%, that definitely ain't bad.
No, that's good.
So that's healthy. So if there is a lot of cash on the sidelines, which it seems like there is, the timing for that hyperinflationary market will be delayed because of that. We'll see the markets will take care of themselves because as the funds flow in and bonds are purchased, interest rates will go down, and that's how that whole thing works.
Small households have been experiencing this inflation for some time. Small households have been experiencing inflation in food costs, in education costs, in core costs that eat up 70–80% of a middle-class household's budget. So you've been seeing the increases there for some time. The general mega economy going from 0% inflation or a 0.5% inflation to 2% inflation. I think last year was 1.2%, and now we're ticking along at 2%. You're not going to notice that part of it because your inflators have already taken place.
Right, and another positive that comes with the amount of inflation that we have now, and also the expectation that if there's cash rolling in, that we sort of stay kind of at this level, at least for some period of time with interest rates, is that the equities market is valued based on, so your stock market is valued based on interest rates. That's one of the big drivers. There's lots of different variables, but current interest rates, treasury rates, definitely do drive the stock market valuation as well. And so if we were to see, and right now, I think the common thought is that the market is actually still somewhat healthy value. So if you're putting money to work, even though we've had a real run-up, it's still likely that you're going to experience gains, at least as we stay with inflation rates within a certain range. If we start to see inflation, or if we start to see inflation interest rates jump from 2% to 7%, that's when you're going to see the equities market start to revalue. Probably not in the next foreseeable time frame as we expect that rates will be.
That's right. Not immediately, but I think two going to 4 would be enough to
see some revaluation.
there's nobody right now forecasting 5, 6, 7.
Right.
There just isn't. The inflators aren't out there that'll do that job. But there's still a lot of money around. Still a lot of money around. So we could still have a stock market that continues to get fuel and a bond market that continues to get fuel at the same time. It's a very confusing, very interesting time.
It has been for a decade or so, hasn't it?
Very
All right, well, thank you very much for sticking with us. And if you have any thoughts on show topics, comments, criticisms, anything like that, we love hearing from you. You can check us out on Facebook. Feel free to send us an email, give us a phone call. We love to hear from you at any time. So until next week, this has been Money Matters. Have a wonderful week.